and welcome back. I'm going to continue on with the What is the Simulation series. That's what this podcast is about. And what I would like to do is focus on something I mentioned in the previous podcasts for What is a Simulation, and that is where we talked about time. And I described it to you as being, for the sake of trying to understand how time might work for us. We already established that the linear representation going from left to right is not time. It is a representation of the flow of time in a way that we can easily map it and measure it. But the actual measurement of time is cyclical. For a start, where time, came about in terms of its measurement through observing the movement of celestial bodies in the sky and the position of the sun, etc. So, it's sort of more of a spinning, really, isn't it? And it has been described by others as being a donut-shaped phenomenon, where information goes up through the center and out through the sides, and then up through the center and out through the sides. Part of that conversation that we already had, I mentioned, well, let's if we tip that horizontal representation of time and make it vertical, just to sort of, help us adjust mentally to understanding time in a different and closer to accurate way, where the future is at the very top and that's expanding, and the past is at the bottom and that's expanding, and that the both of those are connected at all times and all points in between, and that as new things happen in the future, it drops down to affect the past. And that right there could be a little bit of a hiccup in terms of, there's questions that we could ask at that point. So, but, the past has already happened. So how could it possibly, what we're doing now didn't exist then? Well, yes, it did. It's always been there. And this is the point. Everything has always been here. And right now, we've marked the current year as being 2021, but there is also a 2056 happening as I'm speaking, and as is sort of identified by the system that we have in place to mark time, which is numbers. And so even though we're here in 2021 right now, there's something happening in 2056 where what is being done in 2056 is affecting our lives right now. It is showing up in our lives right now. And we can't see it because our point of reference, our point of focus is not there yet. In simple terms, it is possible to sight it. You have to know where to look. And it is dependent on the orbit of your consciousness and the quality of our consciousness as to where we are positioned in time as we understand it. So, for example, if I came to you with ideas and concepts that the mainstream did not become aware of until 2056, but I came to you with these ideas and concepts in 2021, then what year are we in? And this is the interesting thing, because information has been allocated as known, not just when the first person thinks of it, but when it becomes known by the collective. So that's another potentially confusing area. So I'll leave that thought with you for a second. And so we're looking at time on a vertical for the sake of trying to understand how time is the past, present, and future all connected, and all happening now, but in such a way as that the information comes together and plays out with a different appearance each time, and that what is happening in the future or what is happening now is affecting the past. And in that way, we can actually turn around and look down the tunnel of time to see how what we are doing today created the past. Another way that we can think of our passage through time is if we imagine being at a starting point of facing the past and walking backwards, and that as we're walking backwards, our experience of the world and history and time moves past us from right to left. And we keep walking backwards, and we keep walking backwards through this passage of time and watching it all unfold until we get to a moment where we turn around and discover what it is that has caused everything that we just saw. This is a concept that is perceptual, but it is a real door opener in terms of how we need to be more inquisitive about the nature of time and more accurate about the nature of time to be able to understand how what we have done today with our technology has impacted and created the past that we have recorded as modern and ancient history. Now, you might be wondering, well, that's a pretty big call. I mean, how is a bunch of phones and computer programs, how does that create an entire universe and everything that we know about it and life on this planet and, all this sort of stuff? Well, here's the thing. We have already established that our experience is based on what our senses are picking up. So when we open our eyes and look out, we are only seeing, hearing, feeling, and experiencing what is available to our senses to interpret. And the mainstream idea is that when we open our eyes and our ears, that we are listening to and seeing an external world. This is where it gets a little tricky, because some of it is, especially these days. Some of it is. But essentially, we are really merely interpreting a projection. And the question is, well, where's the projection coming from? If I open my eyes and go outside at night and I can see the moon and the stars, what am I looking at? Where is that coming from in me? How much of that is just me and how much of it is me along with everybody else. Since we're all here together and we're all impacting each other, how am I seeing this collective hallucination? Or at the very least, this interpretation according to my own senses of what there is available for me to see. Where is that coming from? How is it that an entire universe can exist outside of me? Well, if we go back to the fact that what is happening today created everything that we've come to understand so far and experience so far and record as history so far, that we only need to look at where we are right now and what our technology is right now and how this technology really works and what this technology is really doing. Now, the reason that this is called a time loop, that we're in a time loop, is because it's a system that's run by numbers and time and is cyclical. It's not, really when you think about what a time loop is, it sort of means being bound to the idea of time, and within our perceptual range, the movement and flow of time, and how information is allocated its position in time. Now, we have NASA, we have Google Earth, we have, incredible depictions of our universe and space and everything in it online. It's all online. It's all being broadcast at frequencies that are imperceptible to us. And as we discussed in the previous podcasts, these frequencies and what they're really doing and how they're really affecting us and how they're really feeding this input to us, and how our biological system, our senses and our brain and our heart and the organs in our body and our nervous system and our optic nerve and our eyes and our ears are in interpreting these the information in these imperceptible frequencies. We can then quickly understand that we're really just sort of sadly floating in an external input system, and that once the mind is penetrated, we're just broadcasting our own feed that's being sent to us. It's a little bit like being in a pod. You will have seen them in different movies and different conspiracy theories of humans in glass pods floating in water with, wires connected up to them and wires on their heads and all the rest of it. And if we looked at that as sort of a representation of this idea in terms of our senses, in terms of our sensitivities, in terms of how we are swimming in it, that's one good way to imagine it and it is like that. So we see what we are only capable of seeing. And the more trauma we experience, the more stress we experience, the more we are subjected and conditioned to this input. Our ability to see and experience beyond that is decreased. You've heard the expression being dumbed down. We have been desensitized through the experiences that we have had since birth. And if we were to look at how many frightening things we have experienced since birth, or how many times we've been upset, or how many times something has shocked us, or fatigued us, or pressured us, or made us respond with a rapid heart rate, and stress and worry. Each time these things happen, we are desensitized because we become fatigued, and those processes become damaged. It's been said, obviously, as well, that through an education process, if the right neuronal circuits aren't activated and engaged, they cease to function. And we only think in a certain way and can no longer think in another way. I think most of the problems with online communication, real-time communication, is when we have a scenario where a lot of people are coming together from all different levels of education and all different levels of awareness and all different levels of perception, and trying to have a discussion about the same thing, but everybody's seeing it differently. And in two-party systems, when it comes to politics, well, you get a group mentality. So everybody on one side will see it one way, and then everybody on the other side will see it one way, because they come to a consensus among themselves and they all simply agree to it, whether they see it that way or not, which is kind of weird. So even though an individual might not even understand what it is that they're agreeing with, they will all agree with it because that's the party line. And it's a little bit like that for us in everyday life. And the input that we're taking in, and how our survival instincts are exploited and manipulated to take a position. Do you agree with this? Well, you might think, no, I really don't, but I'm going to have to say that I do if I want to keep this job, etc. And this is what's also happened to us at a perceptual level. And what we're experiencing is that when the general consensus, when the collective is such that the majority of people see things a certain way, that also impacts anybody who is even trying to see something a different way, because we are all affecting each other all the time. It is true. We're all just part of the one thing of energy here. But on an individual basis, in our senses being desensitized, we're not seeing each other for the energy that we really are. We are seeing the lowest vibration of that energy, which is the illusion of physical form. And then through the power of our brain and our minds, which are incredibly, incredibly powerful and magical, we experience ourselves as being clothed in flesh. And it becomes real. That's magic. That is actual, real, true magic. But we also have what happens when the finer frequencies of energy in this universe, in our consciousness, I should say, when the finer frequencies of love energy and light energy become brutalized, they degrade and they slow down. And so that what once existed in the ether in a very light and delicate way materializes eventually. It solidifies. You can see this principle playing out in the life of a single individual, that when we are children and we can seemingly run for days, we do not get tired. We feel weightless in everything that we do. We grow up and we experience events that eventually lead us, in a lifestyle and food intake and all these things that we're exposed to and how we live and in this system. And eventually we're led to a point where we are old, we have aged, and we feel weight. We feel a physical weight. We carry the world on our shoulders. Because for every stress that the mind and the heart experiences, it becomes real for the body. So where there is a fine frequency of love and light being brutalized, those finer frequencies will degrade. It can't be sustained at that frequency, and it degrades. And eventually we feel the gravity of the situation. So this is how the understanding of time needs to be able to understand how we have been traveling backwards through time until this point, witnessing everything that we have done and created and impacted from what we're doing today. And then we've turned around and looked at it and gone, it's been happening all the time. Smartphones have always been around. They just weren't within our frame of reference because the information was not available in those years that we experienced, because the data didn't line up with those dates. It doesn't happen until the system itself actually runs full circle. And that is what I feel happened with me. The system ran full circle and detonated. And I've been able to, I think, figure it out. So our consciousness and what we're experiencing, and this is such a huge can of worms because there are so many different religious beliefs, there are so many different metaphysical ways of looking at this, but the hard brass science of it is something that we can actually all agree on, because in simple terms it's very easy to understand. You have energy systems that are, predominantly underneath it all, sound, light, vibration, energy, vibrating at different frequencies. Then we can easily follow through with a line of thought that says, well, what happens, what has to happen for our preferred state to become solidified and subjected to gravity and weight and sickness and death and all of this sort of stuff. And this is how. This is how. So right now, we have saturated airwaves. They're saturated, and they're beaming Google Earth. They're beaming Google Space. They're beaming every image that's on Street View. It is beaming through us. This is what we are seeing. Our modern world, as it is on the internet. And everybody's got a handheld device with an automatic identification locator, your phone number. And that all the information online through an electromagnetic field lines up with your phone number. And what you experience in that sense is dictated by your phone number. Other things as well, background things, driver's license, car registration, birth certificate, bank account number. So when we pick up a smartphone and we download the Facebook app, what we're really saying is, I want this experience that I'm having as a spiritual being in a human body. Really, I really, 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 really want to experience Facebook world, where I'm just a number and people spy on me and steal my intellectual property and violate my privacy and are mean, where people fight all the time. Where every single television show ever is constantly throwing videos. Where Wikipedia tells us the way things are. Where all the music that's ever been created by modern man is playing all at once. Where everything that I post, has a heading and it's facebook.com and then it's my name and then there's a bunch of numbers at the end of it. Where everything that I post gets added to the system for everybody else to experience. Where I'm either happy, sad, angry, or wow. This is my new emotional range. Or laughing. And they are going to tell me what time it is. And I'm going to tell them how old I am and where I live and who I know from school and where I went to school, and you're out. Trapped. Ensnared. In an incredibly dangerous romper room world. I want to be in a world with pedophiles. I want to be in a world with arms dealers. I want to be in a world with sex traffickers and rapists and murderers. And we're all going to live under the same roof, Facebook's IP address. And this is what we're signing up for when we download a social media app and give them everything about us and participate in their system. We are subscribing not just to individual pages of interest. We are subscribing to an enormous simulation with an unthinkable amount of data flowing through it all the time. And 90% of it we don't need. 90% of it is not beneficial. 90% of it keeps us stuck. 90% of it keeps us on the cycle of karma. 90% of it keeps us bound to the illusion of time. 90% of it keeps us from flying. 90% of it is gravity. So here we are. Here we are. Further to this, well, look, I don't have a Facebook account, so how come I'm in the same world as you guys? Well, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not experiencing things the same way you would. Maybe if I had a Facebook account, I'd be dead by now. Maybe because I don't have a Facebook account, I'm not dead by now. There are cell towers everywhere. There's a TV aerial on my roof. I'm renting this place. I can get up there and take it off if I want. People have been to my home with their phones turned on, so I've been geolocated by Facebook and Google. My address is on Google Earth, Google Maps, Street View. So I'm still in it. But Google's on Facebook. And Facebook's on Google. And you might be wondering why I say it's Facebook. It's actually all Facebook. And why I'm not saying, well, it's all Google. You think, well, Google's much bigger and they have maps and Street View and space and all sorts of stuff happening. It's because of the way Facebook is engineered, the impact that it has on the brain and the eyes and the heart. And Google is still very much of a heavy influence. Like it really is. It plays a massive role. Everything that's online plays its part. Everything. But it's all coming together at Facebook. And when we looked at how social media is engineered and how these platforms connect internally and that they form their own portal system, which lines up with the glands in the brain, and we're talking about Facebook as the King's Chamber in the Pyramid of Giza, which we used to show how this would work in terms of artificial intelligence. We then enter a new area of knowledge, and that is, what is the thalamus gland? What is this King's Chamber? What does it do? What is it connected to? And if you'd like to, you can look that up for yourself. Have a little look at the thalamus gland. Some of the things that have flown around online. The Eye of Horus is in there. The glands of the brain. The universal eye. Through that which we see. On a whole other level. So yeah, that's kind of really what I wanted for this podcast to be about, was just a bit of an elaboration on this concept of time, to give you guys another way of looking at it. It's something that you sort of have to work through and sit with for a bit and get used to viewing in a certain way. And then from there, the research that I've done will, and the evidence that I've presented will start making more and more sense to you. And yeah, I'm glad that I've been able to elaborate also a little bit on this idea of a simulation, and how where we're at has affected and created the past. and continues to do so, and will continue to do so when we all get up tomorrow out of bed, as we continue to live through this experience that has been imposed upon us. And I promise I will do a podcast very soon about the underlying code, the matrix of this thing, and where it came from, and how all of that hangs together and what it does. So for now, that's it from me for this one. Thank you very much for listening. I hope I have at least made some small portion of sense that helps. Thanks.